We'll see.
I could talk about it. It's out this world.
What do you got here? I had a friend who was
George, one day we have to get you into the crystal room. Okay, are you still?
First, introduce ourselves. There's three of us here who are going to be presenting. I'm John James Pron. I'm an architect. I'm a retired professor from Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University. I've taught architectural design and also architectural history for about 35 years there. And I've been a member of USG since about 1982. My wife and I taught in the church school. I headed up the pledge campaign one year. And every once in a while I contribute a drawing or two to somebody's idea for what should happen at the Unitarian Church. I haven't given this lecture on history in about 10 years in this space, but with two other people here, it's going to update to current issues and new ideas. So I'm joined by Paula Behrens and Howard Silver. Paula.
You're sharing the mic. Paula Behrens, I'm an architect and I taught at Community College of Philadelphia for 30 years, architecture, history, construction. And I've only been involved at USG for 4.5 years, so I do not have historical knowledge, but I have read a lot and learned a lot from these folks.
And Howard Silver.
Hey, my name is Howard Silver. I've been a member here and active on the Building and Grounds Committee since 1993. Before retirement as a general contractor, I worked on many projects here, many that we'll be talking about today. Since the first time I walked into this building, I've been curious of how this elegant gem of a building came into being, and how it became home to such a wonderful community of people. If any of you have ever wondered this as well, today we hope to provide you with some background which will help you answer this question.
So what this is about is the history and development of the building itself, appreciation of its very, very fine architecture, the functions and the symbolism and the meanings behind the design. But also, the purpose of this is to raise awareness of and certainly encourage conversations about our current issues and possible future changes as USG continues to evolve and thrive. So I'll begin. This is what most people in America think of when they, think of Christian churches. And the images here, they're very, very familiar to what you see here. Ceilings on the inside, if they can afford it, are uplifted. Openings, windows, doors are arched or pointed. Stained glass if you can afford it. Outside a bell tower if you can afford it. One of my favorite images here is the one at the very bottom in the center, which is just a couple blocks away. It's on Germantown Avenue at Johnson Street. And obviously it was a storefront that had an apartment up above it. And it's been remodeled as a little community church. And you get it. They did just the right things to make it into church. This is what we can easily recognize. A little bit of the history. Germantown was founded same time William Penn settled in Philadelphia. And he invited German, Quaker, and Mennonite farming groups to come to Pennsylvania. That's 1683. But they weren't going to live in the Philadelphia grid that is so famous and so well defined here. They were farmers. So we gave them the Northwest. Germantown Avenue was an Olympian path at the crest of the hill. And people built their houses, German people built their houses left and right. And they had fields behind them. Narrow fields, but fields that ran very deep down to the streams on either side. That's the beginning of what Germantown was about. The other thing Germantown is known for in American history is, of course, the Battle of Germantown in 1777, when the Brits held the little town. Washington attacked from numerous directions. One of the focal points of the battle was the Cridley Mansion, which was right across another old church, right at the intersection of Germantown and Johnson Streets. And that was a sort of a stone fortress. But what you're seeing in the little red circle is the site of our present church. We were not on Germantown Avenue. We were not in the fields. You know, the area was really a ravine. It was densely wooded, and I doubt there's any kind of Revolutionary battle artifacts anywhere on the site. I don't think it happened anywhere near us. We were well away from that. Pushed to the 19th century, highly educated, upper class, money Quakers, Unitarians, and WASPs treated Germantown as a fashionable Victorian neighborhood. And that was because we had the regional rails, we had the trains. You could live with your family in a country setting, and Dad could take the train to the banks and universities where they worked. And the original site chosen for our first church is the southwest corner of Shelton and Green, which is in the circle you see here. Germantown Avenue, main Germantown Avenue, you can see this in the big box. One end is Vernon Park, where the mansion still survives. The other end is Market Square, where George Washington lived during the yellow fever epidemic in 1793. The first architect of our church in Germantown was a person named Frank Furness. And Frank Furness was the most creative 19th century Philadelphia architect in the books. And he was well connected to universities, to banks, to art schools. You're seeing PAFA, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts on North Broad, which is his most famous building and been beautifully restored. He built a lot of banks in Philadelphia as well. He was connected to the banking establishment. 3 churches in Old City, all of them demolished in the 1950s because the area was becoming quasi-neo-pseudo-colonial around Independence Hall and Carpenter's Hall, and these were considered to be insults to the art of architecture at the time. You know, now, much regretted in terms of having lost them. But if you look at them, I mean, you know, they're bizarre. They're very unconventional looking. The proportions are wildly compressed or exaggerated, and it's crammed with overwhelming details. The other famous building in Philadelphia is the Furness Library at the University of Pennsylvania in 1882, which is not named for him. It was named for his brother, who was a prominent professor. But obviously, family connections helped get the job. And it's just some of the details, the colors, the patterns, the unexpected way in which he put things together are, well, to me, they are just breathtaking. You know, they're really kind of stunning, I guess. And also, later in his career, he did the first Unitarian church, which is the 22nd and Chestnut in downtown Philadelphia. Reverend Hannon was his best of all. This is where she came from to teach right here. Sorry, I back up one. Stay with that. The church is beautifully kept. The porte cochere, the vehicular drop-off, has been demolished. And I really miss that. It looks like this woolly mammoth kind of snorting on the sidewalks of Chestnut Street. It just, you know, that's the Rittenhouse Square neighborhood, and it was just too much.
It's that triangle on the right, that roof that's triangular shape is gone.
Porte cochere, drop off. Now here's the first church. Sorry. The first architectural design of Frank Furness, his first building. And it's very timid, it's very conventional. He hadn't quite found his stride. He was the son of the minister of the first church in town. So, did the kid get paid? I mean, was he forced? I don't really know, but again, a family connection got this. And it's modest, conventional. I think money was kind of tight because if you look at that bell tower, it's not a 3-dimensional bell tower. No. Normally they have 4 sides and the bell's in the middle. And this is like a 2-dimensional cutout, meaning they just didn't have the money to kind of build the expensive, full volume tower. So obviously there were money issues here.
And you can see that little booth there, that was a policeman. It's before the days of stop signs, stoplights and stop signs. He would direct vehicular traffic if that corner isn't that busy.
Which means the area was becoming commercial. You needed to have a traffic officer on the corner. This is probably a Sunday, not a shopping day. The area is becoming very commercial. Here's the interior. Again, it's conventional, tinted, nicely done. The plan shows, again, a big organ. They were very much into music even at an early stage on the left transept. But I think what I want you to note is the text underneath that plan, because those are pew rents. You could not sit anywhere you wanted. You had to rent your pew. And obviously, if you were elite in money, you got the first pews, and the lesser people sat in the back, and I don't know what visitors were even welcome in this, but obviously it's a very different Unitarianism than we have today. Pew rents. But what was done is that some of the windows were saved. So the window, which is right over my head, the transept window, is from that church. And likewise, the three smaller windows that you see here, very beautiful. I believe they were made in Europe, were brought here to this church to be incorporated. And I like this sort of adaptive reuse of saving the original and bringing it forward. Side elevation of the parish house and the Sunday school. But again, the site was small, was crowded, membership was growing, kind of a dark church. Discussions about moving. Today, the site has been sold, the church is demolished, and what was Allen's department store in the upper right. That is the site of the Unitarian Church. And Howard, you say they make a lot of money out of this.
Yeah, the original building was sold to George Allen Company for the new department store for $300,000. Projected cost of a church at a new location at that time was $375,000. So Mr. Cyrus Curtis of Curtis Publishing and Mr. Clarence Clark, two of the prominent benefactors of the church, got together and they chipped in the rest of the money. And Clark was actually a banker and developer who was instrumental in developing West Philadelphia from farmland to a suburb. And he was also a founding member of the Union League. So it's quite a different congregation at that time.
And what is significant is the fact that there were a few very, very wealthy members of the congregation. And so when money was ever an issue with building a new church or renovating or repairs, somebody stepped in and just provided the money. The church never made enough on its own out of pledges to survive. It had lots of wealthy angels that did just that.
Reverend Hannah mentioned Frederick Taylor today. He was another wealthy member at that point.
1921, began looking for other sites to move. Still staying in Germantown, even though it's the perimeter of Germantown. This is a drawing in the archives here that shows they were looking at a site at Lincoln Drive at the top, Wissahickon Avenue there, and that's Rittenhouse Street. Again, at Hilltop, we're overlooking Lincoln Drive. But they ended up a little further up the road. Again, in the oval in the upper left, that is the site that we have today. It's interesting because Lincoln Drive, as it twists and bends, was actually a stream. It's a covered over stream, which is why it twists as much as it does. It was the, if you could read the paper mill run that was there. But Lincoln Drive, today called Lincoln Drive, beautiful drive to connect to the Wissahickon, Fairmount Park, downtown Philadelphia. A carriage drive, a leisurely way of enjoying that part of the city. The gates that you see in the lower right have recently been restored, and that's very nice. Right over the gates is the wrecked mansion of a person who was Henry McElhen. He was the president of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He built his mansion overlooking that. That's the next building down from us on Lincoln Drive. It's a wreck right now. It's right behind Mingleback School's parking lot. They tried to put it on the historic register. It's going nowhere. But again, this is quite a fine neighborhood. And this aerial view, it dates from 1959. Sorry, this jumps a bit. But it shows the wooded nature of the landscape that is still largely maintained and largely preserved. And apparently there were a number of wealthy Unitarians who, on the board, who some of them actually bought surrounding houses on either side and donated them to the church, only to keep it residential. They didn't want like a department store or something, or a gas station to build nearby. So this was an investment to keep the area looking rather wooded originally. And here's the original design of the church. Yeah.
Is that the church right there in the middle?
Yes. Yes, that is the, sorry. That's the church. You can see the tower sticking up. The white is the courtyard right behind it. Here's the original design. Edmund Gilchrist, architect, known for his English and French Norman country houses, built many for developers in Chestnut Hill, and he was engaged to design the church that you see right here. That's a drawing from the earlier proposal for what they were going to do. And the site plan shows how it's sitting at the edge of the ravine. Really something.
One more thing about Gilchrist. He was a favorite of Henry Houston. You've heard of Houston School and all that, and George Woodward, who were major developers of this area, the Woodward houses. And so he did a lot he had a lot of commissions in this area at the time.
Groundbreaking, 1826. Members of the board. There's a wonderful picture here of steam shovels sticking into the Lincoln Drive hillside, rocky hillside. Dedication of the cornerstone. Got publicity for cornerstone laying. And that happened in 1927. Howard, you can talk about the construction in pictures like this because it looks like a lot of stone on the outside. But
Well, the picture shows steel framing, not wood, combined with concrete slab floors and the concrete roof finish. Essentially, the construction methods and materials were the best money could buy at that time.
This is the same era that the PFS building was built, the first modern skyscraper in the U.S. really, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So you can see that it's this time where lots of different things were being considered, although most things were being done traditionally, even if the construction was steel and concrete.
the dedication. Howard and I do not know where the cornerstone is. I looked again this morning. Maybe somebody opened it at some point, take it, and we can find it.
You have to move the mic.
We can't hear you.
Move
Can't
the
hear
mic.
you.
Move the mic back.
Can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Your mic.
Oh. What I was saying is this is the cornerstone laying, and Howard and I walked around the site. I just checked this morning, and we don't know whatever happened to the cornerstone. There's nothing in place anywhere on the outside. Maybe for an earlier event it was opened and shared.
What does that mean out there? Like, what do you see? When you just, what would we see if the cornerstone were remaining?
You would have a date on the outside.
Oh,
of the
I
page.
see. Okay.
And it's hollow, and dated on the outside, it's hollow, and they would normally put like sacred special memorial objects on the inside. So it may still be there somewhere. Dedication, got a lot of publicity. Philadelphia papers talked about it. Local papers, so this was a big deal in Philadelphia when the church was dedicated. That's the architect's original drawing. This is as it is pretty much today. I don't know whether they didn't make a decision about using Wissahick and schist exposed. That's very much a local material. Doesn't show in the drawing on the left. But there was a lot of changes to the front. You can see the staircase, grand as it is, has been much cut down, and we don't have those retaining walls, we just have lawn and grass. I don't know whether it was a money thing. It would concentrate an awful lot of people in a very small area right in front on the sidewalk. The existing building kind of spreads out the people as they leave, so it may have just been a good decision in terms of usage to have done that. And I love this picture. This is Lincoln Drive in the late 20s. Everybody had a car. Everybody drove. Again, it was a leisurely, park-like avenue right there. And obviously, everybody came in the front door. Everybody entered through the front doors.
And they had a lot of people attending services. The services were generally, they'd have 200 people here. And so, the question is, before a parking lot, there you go, bumper to bumper cars.
Courtyard, which is on the upper left. It's very much your English, Georgian, Palladian manor house of the 17th and 18th century. And of course, the architect, Gilchrist, specialized in housing construction. But you look at that and you can see it's aristocratic English roots. It's not like it's not like the American presidents with Monticello and with Mount Vernon. These are much grander stone gestures than you see here. That's the taste. I'm showing the bell tower, the spire. Every church will have one. I'm putting it next to Christ Church because Christ Church actually added that bell tower. Ben Franklin raised money to build that because churches need the tower. It's 100 years older than ours. But again, if it's a church, you have to have that standard motif, and they wanted it here as well. And where did that taste come from? Where did the style come from? Well, the architect Christopher Wren in London, the Great Fire of London burned a good bit of the city in 1666. And Christopher Wren not only built St. Paul's Cathedral, but he built dozens and dozens of parish churches that were burned in the fire. And every one of them, he gave a unique kind of stylistic treatment, so they all look different. If you look at the little one in the center with the blue sky, if you look at the kind of boxy lower level of that tower, it looks like our church took exactly that. But not the top. If I look at the Wren Church on the far left, and just look at the pinnacle at the very top, it looks like, again, our architect, brought those two together and combined them. Today, the church, the courtyard, proposals to maybe better utilize some of the spaces. I think when I was head of the pledge campaign, I did a drawing. That's just the only sketch I had left of a glass atrium over the courtyard to bring together all different sizes. Never meant to be practical or not solving any problem, but just to excite people in the future of the church, how to visualize the future. And the one on the upper right was my drawing, and Howard and I talked about that. We were not authorized, but Howard talked about the leaking roofs that were continuous. Oh, you got it. The leaking roofs that were continuous over the men's and women's rooms down below because it was a flat roof and always leaked. And I proposed putting spaces over that and basically having 4 additional small meeting rooms or classrooms at the same time, solving the space problem and also solving the leaking problem. Of course, it didn't come to pass. And now,
We didn't mention at the beginning that at the end, we'd really like you to be able to talk about things that struck you and about ideas you may have for our future.
these pictures hardly show the volume of fast-moving, dangerous traffic that happens up and down Lincoln Drive. It's not a place to easily walk. It's not a place to park. The bollards help keep, the traffic back to some degree, but increasingly, you're getting into the 40s and 50s. People have cars, and parking needs to be an issue. So you have the beginning of parking in the rear as one. So the wooded setting, the tree, the spire, many people who commute back and forth know our church with its iconic facade, its iconic front right there. Surprisingly, a number of congregants don't really know that. When I did a drawing to show the, sorry, going the wrong way here. When I did a drawing showing the spire of the church, people who were parking in the back for months and months didn't recognize it, didn't know that was the church, didn't know that was the front to which they were entering in the back. So it's not really, visible much from parking and from the activities in the back. But it is very iconic, and we use it well as a place to kind of bear witness to our issues. So you're seeing the fact that we are frequently out there with signs and posters, and, reminders and protesters, and I think that the bollards were also done, at least partly to add security to the church. If you look what happened in New Orleans, or if you look what happens in German cities, a crazed driver could do some real damage to the congregation. So
they were all actually paid for partially by a grant from the state for security for religious institutions that we applied for in World War II.
The interior. This is the interior looking back. Howard has emphasized the very best materials that were used in terms of the oak, beam ceilings and such. Not terribly church-like in many ways. Flat ceiling. The windows are squared off. They've been adding some stained glass, but it's not necessarily overtly ecclesiastical. And I'm showing it next to Christopher Wren Library in London. Again, it looks like a lot of the grand spaces and banqueting spaces and library spaces that you're going to find in a lot of those English estates, those manor houses. And the same thing is true of the other spaces as well. That's our assembly room on the right, and I'm putting it next to some of the palace hallways and, again, grand dining rooms of English spaces to see that that very much is the taste. It's very English, it's very aristocratic, it's very tasteful, very expensive. This is a direction in which the church was designed to be the best of taste.
I invite you to imagine this room if, for instance, it wasn't in a cross form and it didn't have stained glass. It might not seem as sacred a space.
One window is the exception, and that's the window over the high altar at the end. That's an original drawing. All the windows sit on solid lintels as built, except for that window which seems to float. The windows in that drawing are arched, but they were not built that way. You see, they are rectangular. So you have that very, very special window, that magical window. It's the heavenly window. And traditional Christianity is one of a Christian God is a God of light. Christmas is the winter solstice. Christmas is the day when Jesus was born and the light began to come for the new season. So the light of God at the end of that axis is very deliberately designed and placed there. And I'm showing you just the orientation of it on the site. Again, there's no accident that our church faces the way it does. The altar, and if I can get there, faces the east, right there. So in the morning sun, you get the maximum amount of sunlight coming through that window. And you enter, everybody enters off of Lincoln Drive, originally from the west, and that is in shadow in the morning. So you are a sinner, you are looking for redemption, you come into that church by the doors, the only real way to come into the church for the majority of people. And you look and you see the sun coming through the stained glass window to the east. That's why they never built anything back here. They can't block that window. It destroys the wonderful light that you get coming in at that particular point.
And so you might notice as you're in here during a service that on a sunny day, it's very bright here, and then it moves around to this side, and then if you're here a while longer, goes down the church.
It's good solar gain in this particular area. Whatever warmth you get, it may not be a lot, but the sun is coming in faces the Canadian wind. That's cold and damp and chilly. And so it's intelligently done on that level. And of course, the whole plan is very symbolic.
Can you move the mic back?
Or plan, it's a crucifix.
Mike,
I'm sorry.
There's a mic.
The plan, I get carried away. I'm going to jump up and point. Long and narrow, it's the traditional crucifix plan. You're entering into the cruciform space. You're entering into the crucified body of Jesus, and that's very traditional. These are just English Gothic churches, and that is the path. Everybody enters at one end. It's a long, long walk forward to the altar at the other end. And our historians call that the path of redemption. You're seeking to be redeemed. You are a sinner. And it holds for the section as well in these spaces. These are early Christian churches that you see here. They face east. You are in darkness. The side aisles are very, very dark. So you're walking straight ahead. Do not stray. Don't be distracted into the four corners of the earth, but keep your focus overhead in light and keep your focus on the circle of the heavens at the end. It's very, very clear.
But also, notice that by keeping the side aisles low and raising the center, it brings light into the center that wouldn't be there otherwise. And even the Egyptians figured this out in some of their early halls. So it also is functionally works because there can be a lot of activity on the side aisles. We had a lot of kids running in and out today. But in processional churches, people, the priests, whoever, could come up through the center. All of the sacred kind of activities could happen. And of course, you probably know of churches that have chapels on the side. So that kind of functional arrangement really worked well as being having this uplifting light.
So that path, which is symbolic and processional, meaningful, works. Well, it works for wedding ceremonies. The bride processes down the center in an equally significant and powerful way. A little bit in our church, thoughts and prayers when people line up in the center aisle and move forward. That's a very similar kind of procession moving to the altar at the end. The vestige of that.
But of course, it does mean, both with the stained glass and the organization of the church, that it has a very Christian feel, which certainly must have been true of Unitarianism when it started and as it continued, but is no longer in sync with how the church is now.
That's the window. Oops, am I going there right now? I'm going. Okay, there's the window. Originally raw stone. It was a couple years before the son of the original stained glass window maker came in and did the mosaics that trimmed that window as well. That little bit of fabric hanging below the window doesn't help the floating quality at all. It's really, I'm going to rip it down.
That window, by the way, was given by Mr. Curtis when he proposed the idea of moving the church from the original location of Chilton Avenue. He offered to provide that stained glass window, so I imagine it was really a part of the environment of the church that you needed a centering window like that at the altar.
Previous picture showed weddings, which again kind of overtook altar, windows, Jesus, everything else going on. Those ostentatious days. But here it is today. This is a beautiful photograph of the light of the apse space, the light of the window facing east, supplemented now with artificial light, but it's a very, very beautiful space and wonderful to experience on axis. Stained glass elsewhere. A couple weeks ago, Susan Bocchius gave a wonderful lecture on the stained glass windows, which have been added over time, and she's really been the caretaker of making sure that they get protection and attention. She worked for many years with the stained glass company, and so she knows the technical issues of the materials and how this is all put together. And if you missed it, I hope she will give it again.
Susan and also Lynn Kalish have
Lynn
carefully studied the condition of all the windows in the church, including they've engaged outside consultants, and Lynn coordinated restoration projects on the windows from the original church. These windows, which are from 1859, probably were seriously due for some maintenance at that time. And also this Madonna and Child window over there, which had some problems also. A lot of the lead was blowing out and it was in bad condition. But you can look at that and just see how sharp it is now and how good it looks at this point.
Did they have to clean them?
Yeah, they cleaned it too.
Howard knows very well all the maintenance issues and repair issues that are constant in a building that's almost 100 years old. And here's the plan. It's interesting because the original site plan is fairly tight to the property. You can see we didn't own either side, we didn't own the back. We have that bottleneck that plagues us today, where the passageway from the sanctuary to the dining room and assembly room is just a real point of congestion. Sullivan Chapel also is a half level, because the slope is up there and it's very rocky. So those two things have been problematic in terms of circulation to the present day. You can see that the apse, the curve behind the altar, was originally meant to be rounded. They did square that off, but that would have, again, increased the heavenly light.
The site slopes 60 feet from front to back, so it's, while lots of leveled off areas, it really goes down from back at the tracks. And of course, there was, as you mentioned, no parking lot area. The buildings on either side of the church were donated, and the one where the nursery school is, that was a stable for that church, for that building. We've since sold off the houses and only own that.
The parking lot was originally paved, we think about 1960, increasing amounts of people with cars needing to park. Lincoln Drive getting more and more problematic. And it was the architect Bob Bocek, who was a member of this church, who actually cut the outside stair. Not a very ample way of coming and going, but there was really no easy connection to the outside. First big change happened in 1961, 1962, which is when the organ was moved. Music was becoming increasingly important in the church in the 40s and 50s. And the choir was growing in size, and the organ was needing some major work. And so there was a crisis in terms of what to do about the organ. And it has now been relocated from, the side of the sanctuary here to way in the back. It was a crisis for the congregation, and lots of people ended up getting frustrated and dropping out of the church because they were not happy with the idea of it being in the back, and the choir and music both kind of redrawn from the center of activities up in the front.
So you can see the organ was on the left side here, and the pipes were up where the office is now. And then the decision to move it back meant that the stained glass window is no longer visible from inside. Reverend Hannah mentioned that today. And I believe that's what caused the controversy.
Yes, when they obscured that stained glass.
Stained glass.
Right.
This is the original view back in the church. This is today.
Yeah.
You can see organ pipes to the left of me, organ pipes to the right of me. They lost 40 seats up there. The choir, when it sings up there, you cannot easily see them, and they wanted also to be a part of the congregation too, and not kind of hidden away and isolated, which is why you have choir processions with some frequency happening up the front. Of course, the window was lost. And,
It demonstrates the tough choices you have to make in making physical changes and balancing things.
And it was, the decision was made very democratically too. There were a number of congregational meetings where people were given the time to speak pro and con on it, and a number of votes. where they voted, and by a fairly slim margin, it was voted to move it. One of the motivations was it just didn't, from a practical standpoint, all the old organ builders and the building committee at the time felt there was not enough room to put an organ in this location here. So from a practical standpoint, that was one of the objections. And the reasons to keep it there is the things that John and Paul mentioned, about having them be part of the congregation, people be able to see the music and the balcony space and whatnot.
Even so, the acoustics are not terrific, whether the auditorium is large or small. If you have live music, it tends to be shaped like you see on the left, which is wide and rounded for acoustical reasons. And given our church with its cruciform layout, it's just, the sound is just not optimal, way, way, way in the back. So it has been a compromise for the quality of the music with that arrangement.
Still beautiful. So
Now, before we get into other changes, I think that I just want to mention that Paula and I are both architects and teachers and went to architecture school. And I first knew of Unitarianism when I first knew of Unitarian buildings. And this was Frank Lloyd Wright, his first non-residential building in Chicago. A number of us have visited. It's a very, very famous and very beautiful, iconic building, Unity Temple. And I think what is interesting is it's not a cruciform, it's not long and narrow. The space itself is squarish. It focuses on the congregation as the main point of that space. It doesn't have stained glass windows, it has natural light coming in from above. And very, very radical in terms of what you think of as churches. And here's the inside, which is again beautifully kept. Balconies, people, members facing members, everybody sees everybody else. And look at the altar end. It's like almost free of ecclesiastical traditional imagery. To go back.
And that
1906.
was way before this building was built, too.
Queen Victoria was only dead 5 years, and this amazing building was built.
Hi, what's the material on the interior? Is that painted wood or is that marble?
Oh, it's not words.
It's painted. It's painted.
Painted wood. Or plaster.
Yellowish.
Yeah.
And the other building that designed by a world-famous architect from Philadelphia is Louis Kahn's First Unitarian Church of Rochester, New York, in 1967, when a lot of us were in architecture school. Same kind of square space for the congregation in the middle. All secondary spaces wrap around the perimeter on the outside. I do see a bell tower in the distance on the far left, I think, but it's not really very traditionally churchy looking from the outside. I know that Rudy Sprinkle and Andrea Barsovic, are they here?
Rudy's here.
Rudy,
Hi, Rudy.
you went to this church. I think you said that they called it the garage. And I hope that was with affection and not with derision.
The sanctuary has no windows that you can see when you're sitting there.
Yep.
It's all like third story up above. And it's concrete block are the walls. But what happens is the longer you're there, the more the building disappears.
Yeah.
You focus really on what's going on. And
I think those panels are acoustical panels because you have cinder block and concrete, which is pretty tough, which is great for a garage, maybe not for a sermon. And I see that it looks like in the picture on the left, some panels have been hung. I can't tell what images are on them as well. But also note that there are no pews. This is entirely flexible chair seating and a very, very, very large stage up in the front. The pull back should be pulled out of the way so it doesn't obstruct whatever might go on there. So this is it's very interesting, I think, especially to an architect wanting to learn about Christian churches. And the last one to show is not Catholic, it's not Unitarian. It's in West Philadelphia, Church of St. Francis de Sales, Venturi Scott Brown, very important, well-known local architects designed this. This was the time for Catholicism, the Second Vatican Council, which said the priest had to now face the congregation. You had to speak in, preach in, say prayers in English and not Latin. So the altar, which you can't quite see, the new altar, I believe was in plastic, white plastic. And they ran a neon light, behind it to, not to eliminate the old altar or the stained glass, but to sort of neutralize it as a background and just pull, your field of vision forward to see the new altar and the priest. Well, they hated it. I think it lasted a couple of months, and the neon lights went away at the end of that. So sometimes I guess you go too far.
Oh, there's no plastic.
And it leads to just some thoughts for the interior. And I just want to point out that if you look at that original plan on the right from the 1920s, it sure looks like the first three rows were seats and not pews. And that was not done, obviously. Now, you could never do seating in the round by taking out all the pews like you see in the upper right. It's not the space to do that, but it's possible to, at least in the front, substitute and have the freedom for various activities to rearrange those seats in ways for other kinds of activities. And Howard, you can talk about the idea of...
Well, when we had, in 2009, we had a master plan and a design put together by Brower Hoffman Architects. We also had a charrette where members of the congregation met to discuss ideas and different plans, and then we voted on what was highest priority to do, and removal of some of the pews was pretty high priority. However, there was a lot of divided opinions when it came to do that. So a lot of people were not in favor of it, and we kind of figured we'd pick our battles, and just that never happened.
But these three front rows of pews are not attached permanently. So if you have enough strong Unitarian men and strong Unitarian women, you can lift them up and move them out of the way, and it has been done.
The 2009 master plan actually showed the entire church with movable seats and estimated it and everything, but this was quite controversial and obviously didn't happen.
Last slide about some ideas for the interior. And again, the front of our church is used for a lot more than formal services. And for sermons, there's story hours, there's musicians like today. Children sit on the steps to hear tales, biblical tales. If you sit in the back, which is what I'm doing on the right, you can hear the kids, you can hear the talk, but you can't see much of anything. And of course, we can't do tiered seating like you would have in an auditorium. So it's not really optimal for the things that we are increasingly doing in this church. And I don't think anybody is authorizing anybody to do anything like this, but in fact, there have been churches, including Unitarian churches, where they have significantly enlarged the front in order to make it like a stage. And I think the one on the left is actually a temporary setup for that piano. They can set up a temporary thing and curtain it off. So an idea, but not an idea that anybody voted for, and not an idea that anybody ever voted down. So now shifting to important interior adjustments. I'm done, and Howard, the rest is yours.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the things that have been done. So the Building and Grounds Committee now annually focuses on a single space to keep the building looking attractive, welcoming, and reflect the pride that we all take in it. In the last few years, these projects have included new floors in the administrative office, refinished wood floors in the minister's office and corridor, new flooring and new bathroom in the Bristol room, Many of the old steel casement windows, which were state-of-the-art when installed, but now very energy inefficient and rusted, have been replaced by insulated windows that retain the style and character of the original ones. We have the new fully insulated handicap access glass door with video intercom and access control keyboard located in the courtyard, and that was also paid for partially by the grant we received from the state. Air conditioning units have been installed in the large meeting rooms and some of the offices. We replaced the old electrical system with a new 400 amp service. Before that, we had boxes all over with those little, remember those little glass fuses you had in them? So now we have a fully modernized electrical service with circuit breakers. And many of the plumbing fixtures in the building have been replaced as well.
The asterisks that you see up there are pictures that will show you. The rest you don't need to see the electrical upgrades, but you know they're there.
In the early years of the church, when many of the members were among the wealthiest people in Philadelphia, the kitchen, the second kitchen, because the kitchen had 2 rooms at that part. And when you look, let's see, in the picture in the upper right, that's the area where the gas range is, and you see the table there. So people used to come with their maids and their chauffeurs to the church, and that was their spot to hang out.
Literally, it was upstairs, downstairs. You can see the original plan on the left, the 2 chambers that were combined into one, with that red arrow showing the existing space today.
Yeah. And John did the plan for that, and now that room is used for, as well as for coffee hour, for full lunches, cooking classes from community organizations use that. Caterers love that kitchen when they come here, and it's really been a big asset to the church.
I was amazed to find out the kinds of renovations that happened here functioned so well. And of course, Howard was the contractor for this.
This is the pictures of coffee hour in the dining room. Around the same time the dining room was done, the first renovation was completed in the room. USG previously sponsored Explore, which was a singles weekly meetup event in the dining room, complete with disco music. The dining room ceiling was acoustical tiles with fluorescent lighting, and the rear windows and door were hidden by a group of cabinets which hold records and stereo equipment. So we removed the closets and ceiling, we put in the new pendant light fixtures that were in there, and the room was repainted. More recently, many have talked about how hard it was to hear and converse in the dining room during fellowship hour. As a matter of fact, some people said they don't go to fellowship hour because they can't hear anything. So now we put in these inconspicuous but very efficient sound absorption panels and the ceiling to fix this problem. We also had the floors repaired and refinished, the room repainted, and the bulletin boards thoughtfully relocated and redecorated. And at this point, I want to thank George Buckman and Carolyn Cotton and Lynn Kalish for really doing a lot, putting a tremendous effort and energy into these items.
We do rent, and there are a number of weddings that are held in our beautiful sanctuary, and dinners even in the assembly room as you see there, so it gets us additional income. And Howard, you can talk about the daycare center.
Yeah, the Youth Lodge, which is now a nursery school and rental apartment, was the nursery school, cooperative nursery school, was started originally by USG members. Although it's been independent from the church for many years, it continues to thrive. And it provides community outreach plus income. When we talk about some of the adjacent residential properties that were originally acquired to maintain the surrounding landscape character, in 1950, the church had 700 member families and not nearly enough Sunday school space. So they decided to convert the house behind the youth lodge into what they called the house on the hill, and they made it into classroom space. And it was used as classroom space for many years. Eventually, when membership dwindled, that was sold off.
Okay, so this is the 2009 master plan. And so you can see here the church somewhat as it is. So here's the main church, here's the cooperative nursery school and the playground, the grove behind. The parking lot here is about the same here, so this is the existing one. But then if we go to, let's see, oh, this doesn't even show it, but I'm having trouble with my orientation. Okay, so here's the church. And then what it did was suggest moving the kitchen back, so you'd excavate and put the kitchen back there. There was no elevator yet, so it proposed an elevator on this side of the church. And that meant that you could have a wider corridor coming down, 2 doors here, and some of the circulation could be, a lot of the circulation from the parking lot could come through here. And, but it meant that the circulation into the dining hall was large and easy to do. But it required that movement of the kitchen, which would have been an expensive project.
That's the bottleneck you saw in the earlier
Yes,
plan.
so right.
That we still live with.
Right. So but what this plan did by moving the kitchen is to, up on the upper level, what this is, well, this doesn't show all of it, but it added an entry here that had the offices for the minister, etc., and an entry. Oh, excuse me, yes. Oh, well, that's the kitchen below. But so it was up here, and then a new stair was added. Got rid of that awkward stair here. And so that the main circulation would come in from the parking lot here, people would go downstairs and then enter here. The other big thing this does is add a classroom wing. So back when we had lots of kids, I mean, we now think of ourselves as having lots of kids, but apparently nothing compared to back in the mid-2000s. And so there are 5 rooms, various offices, storage, etc. And they were connected by this new corridor that would be the north side of the dining hall. So it would be again dug out there, and right now one of our circulation problems is that we have to go through the dining hall and the Edna James room to get anywhere. So that would have solved that. Did this include the renovation of the Sullivan Chapel? Okay, that we're going to get to again. But so it had a lot of good ideas, and as you can imagine, was very expensive, and may have coincided with the church congregation getting smaller, but I'm not sure about that. So here you see renderings coming in from the parking lot. A little bit hard to even make out what these all were, but and so talking about the Sullivan Chapel, you can see that's on the far. This was the original plan, maybe, and At some point, an office was put in here. The stair could only be accessed from inside the Sullivan Chapel. So I'm going to put it over to Howard because he did the renovations of this, which I have to say, it looked to me from the first 2 years I was here that it just was the way it always was. It was done so well.
Sweet, Paul, thank you. So, what happened was that these stairs were relocated. Is that in the next one? So, these stairs were relocated. You can see it on the left. And on the bottom right, you see the location. Now, when you see the drawing in the upper right, if you go into the assembly room, it's one big room, and so we wanted to make that room into classrooms, into 3 classrooms. Originally, there was a partition in the middle, but you still had to walk through the front classroom to get into the rear classroom. So we took out what was then the RE office, which is in the lower section of that plan. We cut out a section of the hall. We built a new section of the hallway in front of where the old straight down stairs were and turned the stairs. And that gave us the ability to have 3 separate classrooms with individual doors to each classroom. And we created that lobby or that library space too. Another interesting part of this project was that those folding doors, we bought folding doors that had a very high sound transmission coefficient, so that minimal noise travels between each classroom, so the classrooms can really function nicely without, when you have Sunday school kids in there who may be noisy or singing or whatever.
So the 3 classrooms can operate quite separately and privately. And the stair has been realigned so you can exit directly to the outside without going through the classrooms. It's a perfect solution.
The 2009 proposal, though, was to put an elevator over by the kitchen, which would not have solved the 2-level, the bi-level of the Sullivan room. And at that point, it had one of those awkward stair lifts that ran up and down. Very, not at all optimal.
That was one of the first projects we did when I joined the church. And it never kind of worked right. It was one of those situations where the guy who was running that project, the coordinator, the member, the salesman called him like every 2 days, when are you going to go ahead with it? As soon as we had started problems with it, we couldn't get him on the phone. Yeah.
And the other problem is it could not be operated by a single person. You need a second person to run it for the person that was sitting in the chair, which was really, really a huge complication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is pictures of the right, the upper right is the new RE office because the stage was basically never used. We came up with the idea of converting that space into a new RE office, and that enabled us to create that walk-through library area in Sullivan Chapel.
It's not ideal because it's not handicap accessible. It's up 3 steps. But in terms of budgets, the best we could do, and it does put the RE person with the other staff people and administer, which is a lot easier for day-to-day business.
As I mentioned, the elevator from that 2009 plan was put over by the proposed kitchen, but that didn't solve the issue of the half levels of the Sullivan. And so, and this comes in with their changes.
This was my drawing for that committee in 2013-14. which is recognized in the master plan, is way in the future. It puts the elevator in the only location possible that can function on grade from somebody arriving in the courtyard and access in all 3 levels. It's double doored and works with the half level as well. So it's meant to be very tiny, very minimal, very functional. In my drawing, I had hoped there would be some natural light. That always was a nasty dark corner. Some natural light at the end to kind of guide your way. So that was the original intention.
Like many of these changes, John was kind of the inspiration. His concepts were very, very valuable in making these changes. He wasn't the guy banging nails or digging foundations, but he directed us. We're very fortunate to have his help over the years.
I worked with Carolyn Cotton a lot, and it was Carolyn's dream and mine that that particular corner where the elevator would be and give access everywhere would become a new main entrance for the back of the church, which is what you see in the sketch on the upper right. From the parking lot, an easy way to get in. The kids can go to RE, people can take the elevator or walk to any of the floors, and that was maybe the thought. Some of us still have that dream of maybe that could happen and maximize that end of the building.
The Grove has apparently become more and more active by the church. As many of you know, they're in good weather. We have our receptions out there. People have done wedding receptions out there. And of course, many people walk in through it. The Memorial Garden is a feature of that space now. If the classroom addition had been built, it would have taken up perhaps half of the back Grove. It would have taken up a lot of it. The labyrinth that was built, I'm not sure when, I didn't hear back from Eva, but maybe 2020 by some Boy Scout, before that, as a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout project, is back in the woods. And of course we started the gardening group, so any of you want to come help us plant and pull weeds, you're welcome to do that.
More sketches by me for, I guess, the garden committee. The idea of taking that miserable, dangerous, dark staircase down and glassing it in. So it is weatherproofed, it is lit 24/7, it is safer, it projects out and becomes the obvious entrance to the church. That's been proposed twice over the years, and we're still waiting.
That's the side stairs that a lot of people come into, from which now is out in the weather, accumulates leaves and ice, and is not a very apt entry to the church.
Okay, this is some photos of the new elevator lobby and a photo of the construction. This John Hubert did the design, an architect to John, a colleague of John's, for the new elevator and lobby. This came about because we were recognizing the strong UU commitment to accessibility, and we wanted to support our aging baby boomer membership by, making it easier for them to change levels in the church. So the church made a decision to add a first-class elevator. John, as I said, proposed the location. A committee led by Bill Dowdle coordinated the construction of the elevator addition, which complemented the interior and exterior of the building. My original proposal is the little drawing on the left in red. It was enlarged considerably with a sort of freight-sized elevator and additional spaces that you see on the right. It became a larger project over time.
And of course, as a newer member of the church, it's hard for me to imagine how all of the food and other things would have gotten up to Edna Jones. I know apparently there was an interior lift, maybe.
Dumbwaiter.
There was a
Dumbwaiter. Yeah, dumbwaiter. But, you know, it's still hard to imagine how all that could have happened. A lot of carrying things up and down stairs.
The architecture is very contemporary. Maybe not surprising an architect, of my generation would propose something like that. That was John Huber's design and not mine. But it's modern, it's classy, it's lit at night, it glows in the distance. It's very much a counterpoint to the existing architecture that you have there. Difference of opinion, I think Howard would have preferred an addition that matched the stonework and the mosaic schist and the proportions. Howard would have preferred something that blended more in with the existing. And me coming out of my knowledge of some of those modernist Unitarian churches, I was happy for sort of a non-secular new day as the image. And I thought it would stand out as becoming an entryway as well.
Respectfully, I concede it to John.
Yeah, next. Okay, it's not going to be very easy to read this image, but in 2000, there was a landscape master plan done for the church. And so that is, we're looking, so here's the driveway, here's the parking lot, and then we have the U-shaped church in here. And the courtyard is right here. So what you see is lots of trees, most of them existing. There were, at the point that this was done, there were 7 heritage trees on the site. That means they're larger than 24 inches. And while you can take them down, you have to replace them with like 4 6-inch trees. So number of things. So there are, the Memorial Garden is shown here. And I think some of the beds, and particularly the plantings along the church going up to the front, were part of this plan. And those of you who've been here longer probably know more about those individual garden beds that were put in. I found it very interesting that there is actually a line of an expanded parking lot back here that would have had a driveway that went straight in and had a parking lot back there. When I looked at it this morning, there's actually quite a slope still in this area, so it might take some excavation. And of course, you'd lose a lot of trees. But as our parking lot has gotten more and more crowded out over the last few months particularly, I don't think that's in the immediate future, but it was something that was shown in this plan. So, of course, we know about all the activities back here. The carriage house, which is now the downstairs has the co-op nursery school, the upstairs is an apartment, and Mariama, one of our sextons, lives up there and takes wonderful care of the outside area there. I'll also mention that I recently heard that some of the kids are going over there for the education classes. Yeah, so we're again using it on Sundays, and then I guess cleaning it up so the kids can come back in on Monday.
Another point about the component of this plan was that we designed it was the new walkway in from the driveway. When we first started coming to the church, there was a blacktop walkway from the parking lot to the building. And it was lit at night by a couple of floodlights on the building. So the landscape plan was the first step in improving the approach to the building. It included the new serpentine exposed aggregate walkway and the large post lanterns. So hopefully we created a peaceful transition while walking from the parking lot to the church.
The driveway, of course, from Johnson Street, if people haven't been here, they're completely confused coming down that driveway. It's difficult for cars to pass. So it's not optimum. It's not lit at this point. I'm going to come to a grant we have that could get lights down that. But the whole entry sequence into the parking lot is just not terrific. It's not a generous entry to the church. There is also, as I said, 60 feet from front to back, and we have a huge ravine on the side of the church, and the project, the stones that go through the center of the grove is part of a drainage project. I've heard combination of either two springs back there or an extension of a stream that may go further north. The master plan talked about 2 springs. So there was also a Drexel student plan that looked at the drainage for the site, all kinds of hydrological things, and so it was graduate students, it had a faculty member, and so it was quite an extensive plan. I have read the whole thing. And they were proposing that the best thing to do for drainage and for water retention is to put a huge retention basin over in the ravine. It would have taken a lot of construction. But the reason you would do that is that the water department, Philadelphia Water Department, in what I think is a wonderful move, but expensive for a place like us, requires that every public commercial building retain 1 inch of water, of rainwater on the site for every rainfall. And we are charged, if you do new additions, and we are charged for every impermeable area. That's roofs, paved areas, parking lots, sidewalks. So we pay quite a bit of money to the city of Philadelphia because of that, for the charge for our impermeable area. If we had more water retention on the site, we could cut that down. If we did changes to the parking lot, significant changes, because we do have water runoff and drainage issues in the playground there. But that is still, a big thing to consider.
So this is the area that we're talking about, the grove, parking lot, the woods and the ravine is off to the left. In addition,
It's down to the lower right, the left. Yeah.
lower left, yeah.
Yeah.
If there were to be an addition to the nursery school, not the nursery school, but the classrooms would have been up here. And these are just general pictures, and we're coming to the end of our presentation. Parking lots, the driveway, it's the reality of American life. You can't do an awful lot to make them beautiful, and people tend to just tolerate them until they get to where they're going. And again, there's been a lot of, I think, additional signage and better landscaping up close to make it attractive. So there are lots of beautiful spaces, including the memorial garden, landscape areas, the side of the church, which is really, really quite wonderful. And increasingly, we're just using more and more activities. This is called the burning wheel, which is the Hindu Diwali celebration of light. People have had, wedding banquets outside under tents set up. There are yoga classes outside. There are picnic tables in good weather. People are in the back there for coffee and conversation and lunch after services. Not going to happen in today's weather. At the bottom are 3 pictures of, actually it was my daughter's wedding. She was married in the grove that you see right here. And if you know Beverly Gross Spencer, we invited her to sing at our ceremony. So it is increasingly actively used.
Can I ask a question?
We're almost done. So I want to mention that in terms of immediate future upgrades, if we manage to get these underway and in the time frame, is in addition to the state of Pennsylvania grant we got that did the bollards and the door here and maybe some other things. I wasn't involved in that one. We also got a big grant from FEMA, I'm hoping, still, for the security of houses of worship, and this was a competitive grant and an enormous amount of effort before I was involved. And those people were Susan Smith, Andrea Barsvik, Howard, George Buckman, Scott Smith, Celeste, Jen Leiby, and I apologize if I didn't include everybody. They worked on a very extensive application that got us the grant. And then got burned out. And so I've taken over the committee, and I am trying to move it forward. There's one more approval that needs to be done, and I hope there are 7 projects. I consider the most important one to be lighting outside in the parking lot and up the driveway, plus some security lights around the church. Also more sensors. We have movement sensors for things at night or when the building is closed.
Security alarm sensors.
Yeah.
Motion sensors.
Yeah.
Security system.
An intercom system, doors to the organ loft, so nobody can just pop up there, and a fence and a gate up off the alley that's past the labyrinth, that's on an alley up there, just to make it a little clearer where our boundary is. Anyone interested in joining me on this?
If you're interested, if you know somebody who might be interested, talk to Paula.
We have a deadline of August 2026 to get all the projects done, all the money requested. So it's kind of looming. So
Get the projects planned or done?
Done.
done,
Oh, so you know what you're
done,
Money spent.
Oh,
paid for, money requested.
Got it.
Yeah.
So here are a few other things we've been talking about in terms of what we need to do next. Here, what we'd like to do next that's, in the realm of possibility financially and whatnot. We have been talking about putting a shower in the Bristol room, because at some point we may want to provide emergency housing to homeless people or immigrant families. We've been looking into that as a project. Also, after the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized that the air quality of the building is far less than optimal by CDC standards, because our systems just recirculate interior air, and they do not exchange any fresh air into the building, which is way under what the standards are for safe interior environments. This is a major financial expense. We've already done research on it, and we've got proposals for it, but we would need to somehow figure out how to do the funding and the staging and whatnot. The other item is preservation of the exterior building. The limestone and fieldstone buildings around the building is very close to 100 years old, and now the limestone in particular is really starting to deteriorate, and we need to study this and develop a plan to restore it to ensure the integrity of the exterior of the building. So if any of you are interested in getting involved with this, please let me know. One of the things is that, with a group of volunteers and a facility of this size and of this age, we not only need money, but we need a lot of people who will take an interest and kind of help support us in doing all these things. And so that's, to continue the mission of the church, we really need support on this end of maintaining and, like they say, maintenance is preservation, and we really want to preserve the building.
Oh, yeah. Talk about, you just mentioned buildings and grounds. Oh, you did?
So if you're interested or know anybody else who's interested, finding out a bit more about this, talk to Howard. Lastly, my final comment as the architect and historian. Church is wonderful inside, wonderful from the front. Great interior spaces. The grove and all that is a great lawn in the back for all kinds of activities, and very, very beautiful and very kind of serene. The church in the back is not really terribly attractive up close. It looks to be like sort of 1900s industrial buildings that have been abandoned. Not really very aesthetically satisfying. So if any of you are interested in maximizing the experience, the aesthetic experience at the USG, if you're interested in seeing that classroom get built, I'd be very interested in finding a better way of defining an attractive main entry. If you are interested in that, I would like you to maybe find some Unitarian, wealthy, local hedge fund CEO, billionaire.
Like we had in 1865.
And you and the donor come talk to me. Final statement is really pretty much what you see up here. We've done a great job so far to protect what we have, and it's going to need more work, and it's not always very glamorous. And we are changing in ways that are very different from the Unitarianism of 100 years ago. This is not the place for proposing specific ideas. We are not authorized to develop solutions that ought to come out of committees and a lot of people involved, but we're happy you came, and hope you are interested enough to want to see this continue to support Reverend Hannah's initiatives. And I could leave you with one quote that she gave in last week's Order of Services: there will certainly be growing pains.
Thank you.
Questions or comments? Anyone?
Well, I have.
Jerry, sir.
I'm just curious, one of the things that I love most about this church is the interior wood. And the carving is spectacular. Do you have any idea who did that?
The carving?
Yeah.
No idea, but there's fabulous carvings all around the building.
Yeah.
These things on the columns and stuff.
And the chancel and everything.
The
The
pews
pews.
did that. Be interesting to look at. The wood itself is called quarter sawn oak, which has kind of like that little bit of light waviness in it. It's basically the best oak you can buy. Most decorative, considered the most decorative and pricey oak that you can buy.
And it holds up well?
Fabulous, very strong.
There was
Go ahead, go ahead.
Just a specific question, when you were talking of these beautiful windows, that's a pristine art, you know, the way it echoes and brings you into a larger context. The window in the Sullivan Chapel, when did that come in and where did it come in from? The St.
Francis.
St. Francis. That's so gorgeous. And
Yeah, that came in pretty early on, I think. Sullivan Chapel was maybe in the early, maybe 1910 or 1920. I mean, it was not original, but at one point, in maybe the 30s or the 40s, Sullivan Chapel, that window was put in. And also, the rest of the room had regular glass. And that wavy cathedral-type glass was put in at that time. And also that document at the front, around the top, that's unreadable now.
yeah.
And also the banner that you see was donated then. That banner that you see on the order of service, that very brightly colored banner, that was donated as an upgrade to that room.
It's beautiful. And, you know, it steps away from the style of any other window that I see.
Yeah, it's later.
Yes.
question. Any plans to save the ceiling?
Yeah.
I always wonder when a piece of silver is going to flutter down in the middle of, surface.
Carol, you want to talk about that?
I can talk about that a little bit. In 1921,
Stand up.
Can't hear you.
2021, we had a restorer and a restoration company come and look at it. That silver is original. It's Chinese tea paper is what it's called. And it's heavy, it's thick. If a piece falls down, it's very heavy.
It won't flutter.
No, it doesn't flutter. And after they visited, I repeatedly asked them for proposals, and they never got back to us. So now, Lynn Kalish and I are working on contacting other restoration companies. At the time, we went up to the choir loft, and there was a place where you could touch it, which is why I know. If you notice, the four corners here are slightly different. That's wallpaper. And at some point, and the reason I know that is that I found that wallpaper somewhere. And it's not the quality of the rest of the silver. Ideally, we'd like to get it glued back, I think. And in the back, in one or two panels, there's faux painting. I think the last two panels here, I think Bill Hoyt did that. Did he do that?
One of the former church members was an artist. We actually rented a scissors lift. Brought it right in through those doors, and I have pictures of that. He was up there, and he faux finished that areas of the ceiling.
Yeah. So the idea is to restore it.
So the stuff that's peeling off, is that the wallpaper? The
Yeah.
peeling off?
No,
No, that's the silver.
That's the original silver. This thing's, it's coming loose.
Okay.
I think in some places it could be glued back.
Yes, I see.
And then if we've lost a piece, it may be faux painting that we fix around it.
I would guess that it was because of water problems above. As far as I know, it's been re-roofed, fairly recently.
I think it's just losing. I don't think there's really been any damage.
No.
Again, it's going on 100 years, and in this room that changes temperatures a million times, and it gets humid, and it's just like,
So it's amazing so much of it is
still also the wallpaper and the room and ceiling.
Yes.
And another scenario is Gorilla Glue, I guess.
Well, getting to it is the biggest
Yeah,
issue.
see this piece, even if you glue it all back, it's going to make it
You need a gorilla to get up there.
Mine is not a question.
Yeah.
I just feel like in this day and age, we need to focus on the safety first.
Yeah.
And that's my input. I'm not around for 3 months.
Right, that's right.
But I really feel that if we know how to make this place safer, that needs to be number one.
Well, certainly the FEMA grant would make a lot of these sort of, what the feds consider safety for, and there is, based upon the nature of being a house of worship and perhaps the way that we worship in particular, and make clear out on Lincoln Drive what our beliefs are, but also just the entry and
Yes.
stairs and that kind of thing.
Yes,
There's
well,
other issues.
Yeah, the other thing
accessibility.
would be making the stairs,
Right.
cover the
Right.
stairs with the
Yeah.
glass. I
Yeah,
think that's
next
a
to the-
wonderful idea.
Yeah.
That also could.
So you got your venture capitalist?
I'm sorry.
Caitlin, sorry.
So, question for Howard, you were talking about the restoring the outside for integrity. Is that structural integrity, and how long do we have before the structural integrity would be?
Well, I mean, eventually, it will lead to structural problems. These walls are super thick. Here, I mean, these are like 2-foot thick walls. But the exterior you know, the exterior shell of the walls is starting to deteriorate, which eventually will cause structural problems. So it really needs to be, addressed, you know, as a priority at this point in time. It's really and it does fall into the category of a structural need.
Masonry buildings, brick, stone, the mortar in between the stones are the things that deteriorate first, and if water gets in there, the freeze-thaw cycle of Philadelphia means that it, you know, more and more water starts to get in there, and then that starts to affect the stone. So repointing is not something that's unusual. It usually happens on a regular cycle, and I don't know, has it ever been?
Well, a certain amount of, there has been some repointing on the sections.
Yeah.
Actually, the stonework is in better shape than the limestone. The schist stone, the smaller stones,
Oh, yeah, and the limestone.
are not, need some attention, but the limestone in many areas is not held up.
Which is a
And
sort
a lot of the
soft
exterior
stone.
is limestone.
Yeah. You had a question? No? Oh, yeah.
Memories in this sanctuary. From about from when I was age 3. We did some, when I was a teenager, we had youth service. It was the first time someone danced up there, Brenda Kidd. And I played a bassoon exercise from my exercise book for her to dance to. And Max Dascom had to look at it ahead of time to make sure it wasn't too crazy, too shocking. And,
She wasn't
had to get, I got my senior prom dress at Allen's department store and my wedding dress at Rouse. And it was 1969 miniskirt. Down this.
Oh, wow. And it happened here, right?
Yeah. Had to get a Roman Catholic priest because of my husband's family. And we got permission from Cardinal Kroll. Because it was a policy, if the bride was attached to it, you would be okay, but it was a Catholic service.
You're lucky it's
In this cross shaped.
Wow.
And we did have a harvest ceremony event. We had white elephant sail in here. Really? That upset some people.
Barbara, were you here when the Christmas pageants where they used to lower people down from the ground?
What? Oh, say that again.
Lower people down from the ceiling. There's 2 panels. The one with the little dots in the middle, they actually come out. And from what I understand, they used to lower like decorations down, or angels down, or whatever.
Not the angels.
Yeah?
That may explain the ceiling paper.
Any other thoughts? Things you want to, bring up as your concerns? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just totally overwhelmed that you are doing all of this and thinking about it and getting grants. And
I think we would welcome anybody interested on the Buildings and Grounds Committee.
They're begging.
Well, short of begging on our knees.
Isn't there like a finder's fee? Don't
We-
you get
we-
paid? Bonus if you bring
Carol
it in?
and I have both had, 20 to 30 years on it. We're kind of aging out at this point.
And a couple other members, one of them is aging out. We meet on Zoom. In your own home. You can sit there and look at the screen.
how many
Rudy.
times do you meet a week?
No, we meet once a month.
Once a month?
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the new sign. This is the 3rd sign since we've been here, I'm not sure.
Last year.
But it really is a nice addition, and you pushed it through.
Carolyn
Having
is.
touched it a little bit as far as the process. I think it's wonderful.
Well, that's another project
Carolyn
Carol
Cotton
has
did.
did. I think she deserves to step back to an emergent role at this point.
I mean, the gestation for that must have been 10 or 12 years.
Oh, absolutely. We started like
The delivery was much better.
And thanks to Eric
I'm the only
for,
one that worked on it.
and thanks to Eric for figuring out how to work it too. Once we got it in, he's the guy that puts the writing and the pictures and all that.
Well, now it's something.
Hunter's doing that. We don't
Yes, and so
have
I've
every
gotten
region.
worried that the FEMA grant, we aren't going to get all of the projects done by the deadline. I'm prioritizing the lighting one, but there's still, it's a lot of paperwork. And so we haven't even been able to start any of the projects. We have one last hurdle. So I'm pretty much the committee with other people taking on some of the projects. So yeah, if anybody wants to chat with me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think this group needs to be thanked.